White as milk and rice. So now this book, the 10 Indian tribes, is actually meant for young adults. Also, adults who like to read really simplified, to the point versions of things. And that's the reason it's published by Duckbill. But the book that I originally started my work on Indian tribes is with White as Milk and Rice. Uh, so I've been a journalist for a very long time now. I think since my late school days, and then college, and then so on and so forth. And while I was on one of my journalistic assignments in Bastar, there was a protest going on, and in the protest, there was a it was a protest against a mining corporation expanding their operations. And there was a sole woman protester. So when I approached her, I don't know what intrigued me. The fact that she was the only woman there, the fact that she actually lugged on herself onto a lorry with so many men and then came all the way here. I don't know what intrigued me, but then something did, and I ended up chatting with her. And so when I asked her what her name was, she said Birsu, and she came from so and so village, which is about 5 hours Kacha road from Narayanpur in Bastar, and deep down in the Abujmar Hills. Noted the village name, then I asked the constituency officer there, and then you know we sort of ended up going there in a taxi, 5 hours on a kacha road, crazy. And I go to the village and I find out that there's nobody by that name, Birsu. And I searched really hard. Maybe I heard it wrong. Maybe it could be, maybe the people knew her by another name. There was a pet name, but then there was no one by that name. And finally, like after spending almost half a day in that village, we were driving out when I saw her outside in the forest, gathering her firewood. And when I asked her how I couldn't find her in the village, and what is did I spell your name wrong or something? And she said, I actually gave you the wrong name because I didn't think you'd come all the way here, because nobody does. There's so many reporters who come to the protest, but they never really come to find out how we are doing. So you're the first one, and I didn't expect this, and that's why I end up using the same name in the book, Birsu, because she did not obviously want her name to be revealed. But that's when I searched. When I went back home and I wanted to know about more about a tribe, which is basically the Huria Maria tribe of Chhattisgarh, I could just find either scholarly articles and pieces from the times of the British officers or German scholars, and this is pre-independence. A few accounts I could find, very academic work, um, post-independence of a few professors here and there. But where was what was happening to these individuals? What has happened after independence to them? How have they evolved? They've been pulled out of the forest, pushed back into the forest. There's been constant change. They've lost their original means of livelihood, like hunting and uh, you know, um, they've access to forest resources. There've been a lot of land reforms, forest reforms. How has their evolution with relationship with the environment changed, with each other changed, as a community changed? Because our idea of community is absolutely different from their idea of the community, which we'll probably talk about at some point. But I could not find any of that. I was very well aware that I'm a non-tribal, that I do not have any academic background in anthropology, but I realized like every voice matters, and let me be the voice which looks at people without any biased lens. Just telling their story as it is, weaving the environment, weaving their feelings, weaving their relationships through it all, and through that understanding that tribe, through that one person's story, understanding the tribe, and that's how White as Milk and Rice happen, and then 10 tribes. Methodology that I use when I document these life stories, or even for my previous book, The Lost Generation, I basically just, I end up first uh, finding what interests me in these tribals, Is there, have they recently been pulled out of the forest? Have they, are they on the brink of change, or have they been pushed back into the forest? because that's when history becomes very interesting to document. The
Right.
stories become very rich. I was interested in looking at those tribes who have recently evolved from and who are somewhere in the middle. And after shortlisting those, I would go down, meet a couple of people. Sometimes I had to meet like 10 people before shortlisting that one story. For example, for the Khasi tribe, I have met academicians, musicians, scholars. Khasi tribe is a very big, it's one of the biggest tribes in India, Northeast. So, met a lot of academician, artists, scholars, writers. But one of the most intriguing was of this lady who lives with who lives with her sister, and who used to live with her aunt and then her grandmother. Because all the men in the family have either walked out or passed away, or the women did not get married. And the fact that it's a matrilineal society. So
Right.
that's when her story became interesting. So that's how I shortlist these people, and choose this one person to sort of tell the story of the entire tribe. And you know uh, when you ask me uh, what I find fascinating, I think every aspect to an urban Indian who has grown up in urban India, the fact that these lives exist alongside ours in the same country, governing the same rules and regulations, um, is just so surprising. For example, the Naga tribe, the Konyak tribe, is still allowed to manufacture and use guns without any prohibitions. The Khasi tribe is a matrilineal society, and a lot of their practices still matrilineal means it does not mean that women have the political upper hand in the family. It just simply means that the wealth is passed on from the youngest woman of the family to the next youngest woman of the next generation. And say if there's a ghar jamai coming home, and then the if say a mama gets divorced, he's walking back into this house. So the fact that this kind of society exists alongside the largely patriarchal society of our country, the fact that uh, Bhil women smoke and drink, and yet they are so brutally patronized by the men in their family. The fact that the Kurumba tribe are still considered sorcerers, magicians who know dark spells and who can create a havoc. And the fact that they claim that they probably know the secrecy of sorcery. Tribes like the what do I call it, the Kanjar tribe, which 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 is a tribe which sort of came together by the nature of its profession rather than the by hierarchy. Is They were looters. They were tribe Kanjar, मतलब जो वन को चढ़ते हैं, Kanjar. So, these tribes basically were pushed into the forest by kings who invaded the Rajput kingdoms, and these were essentially once upon a time soldiers of Rajput armies, and they were pushed to the forest where they had no means of livelihood, where they were forced to take to looting and looting homes and finding and sort of forcing their way into the households. And from there, it turned out that it became sort of their way of life, and it ended up becoming a tribe in itself. And there are many such tribes, the Pardhis, and who were once sort of branded the criminal tribes of India by the British government. But yeah, like the fact that all these life coexist alongside us, they follow the same constitution that we do, and yet we know so little about them.
Yeah, true.
All we see is the song, the dance, the pictures, the jewelry, the clothes, but what the sort of empathy that's needed, not sympathy, but empathy that's needed to relate to these lives which dominate, which sort of like which are a huge chunk of our population, was very very interesting for me. For Mitres Milk and Rice, there were six tribes that I had sort of finally written about in the book. And of those six tribes, there were four tribes whose languages I could speak because I sort of grew up in Hyderabad, so I know a little bit of Telugu. I know Hindi, I know Marwari, which the Kanjars were speaking. I know English, which the Kurumbas can speak a little. They can either speak a little bit of English or they speak their own language, the Kurumba language.
Oh.
Then you had the Khasis could speak a lot of English. So there were one or two times when I did meet, I think in two or three, especially while interviewing the Halakis of North Karnataka and while Kurumbas, of course, I needed translators. And I was lucky to find some very interesting people, somebody who lives amongst them, who understand, who could probably explain. Like, say, for example, if a Kurumba is saying that we climb the tree to collect honey, he would just use that line, but the translator would actually give me more layers, like, about, hey, why don't you tell them
Understand
about the
what
little
is.
rope that you use to climb
Mm.
it, or why don't you? So, the biggest challenges were, of course, making them talk because these are the people who have never spoken to the media or who don't even watch any of the news channels. So they don't understand, and they find most of my questions bizarre. Um, why is she asking me about what I think about what I want my children to be, or why is she asking about the kind of food I'm eating or how I grow my vegetables? Just most of the questions, she like, okay, like this is how it is. Why do you need to know more? So for that back and forth, and also often often interviewees alter their realities to sort of rewrite their past in their own ways. Let me repeat that sentence. Often the interviewees rewrite their past to suit their own idea of the past against what really and actually happened. And that becomes a challenge because it's very hard to identify, right? Because this is this person's story. He's telling me this story, but so how I try to navigate that challenge is by getting the same fact from different sources. Say if there is a wife talking, then speak to the husband as well. Speak to the sarpanch. Speak to the people, the neighbors. Speak to a scholar who understands this area very well. Speak to maybe uh, like a local police station or like a CRPF person. So get the story from multiple people and your different versions. But of course, I'm telling only the woman's tale or the man's tale, but then maybe in the next line you'll probably find a little more that I know about the story. So, yeah, this was the biggest challenge. Absolutely. Yeah, I think generally, um, um, for anybody who's connected with their roots, music and dance become a very important sort of an element. And these people, especially so, because they're so deeply in sync with the environment and to their traditions and to their local instruments, to instruments made out of the local trees or local, animal. The so this sort of becomes a very important aspect of the tribals. Now, in the case of the Halakis, the Alaki women especially are a very hardworking lot. They start their day with cooking and cleaning, and then end up in the forest collecting, gathering firewood, coming back home, cooking again, tying all the firewood together, taking them to the market, sell it, come back home, tend to the cattle, all this while, getting their chores done. So it's a very hardworking tribe. So to do this day after day, 7 days of the week, 365 days of the year, except some crazy rain days, they need song, they need music to sort of get through to kill the mundaneness of it all. And so they have a song about everything. They have a song about milking the cattle, to sitting in the porch and chatting, to sun, rain, monsoons, to sadness about in law, sister in law, about feeding a baby, about birthing, about walking through the forest, sunrise, plants, shrubs. In fact, this is how they pass on information from one generation to another. Through the medium of these songs, they teach the children the medicinal values of certain plants, or or how to keep themselves safe, or what to watch out when you're first in your in-laws' homes. And so that is the halaki. And then when you talk about say the Jaravas of Andamans, which is there in the Ten Tribes book, it's not there in the White and Milk and Rice. For them, song and dance is everything, and it's basically how um it's their way of unwinding at the end of the day. How we probably turn on the radio. For them, it's music. It is for the Muria Maria tribe of Chhattisgarh, the Bastar region, that is. For them, um, lingo was basically he's their sort of a demigod. The god. So basically, the let me give you a quick explanation about the Muria Maria tribe. Basically, they follow this culture of having a ghotul in the middle of the village. Each village has its own ghotul, which is basically an adolescent home where all the young adolescents between 12 to 16 years of age end up, where men, women both. They sing, they dance, and at the end of the day, they choose their partners and sleep with them. And no person can repeat a partner for more than 3 times. And once they come at a marriageable age, they end up getting marriage, and most of the time it's arranged marriages because they're done with silly boys of the Gutul, and they end up like marrying men of other villages. There are few marriages from Gutul as well, but then that's very rare and very interestingly. So now this system of Gotul was apparently set up by their god, demigod for Lingo, who Lingo Pen, who basically used the music to pull the young women and men out and into his new home that he'd made away from his seven sister-in-laws and seven brothers. Um, and uh, and this sort of like is a legacy that they still follow. So yeah, music is everywhere in the tribal world. This is not a very simple answer.
Yeah.
It's a very complicated answer because traditionally, how these tribes, and this is I'm talking about this like those pre-independence times,
Okay.
these tribes have been very, very self-sustainable. They don't really need to go and sell their forest produce because it's an ecosystem in itself.
Mm.
They have what they need from the environment. They leave some for the environment. They take whatever they need. They always give the environment back. They're very in sync with the nature. They take only how much is required. um they know the patterns of nature. They know when a storm is coming, when there's a thunder. They know how to grow, what to eat, in what season. And this is before the mainstream society sort of started infringing into their lives. Because as soon as that happened, diseases happened, the need for more happened. Look at Jaravas right now. For example, the Jarava women are exploited, like really exploited for sex, for labor, for cheap labor. Look at the Maria women, or the Santhalis in the Bihar and West Bengal region. Um, because for them, sex is a very normal. It's a very day-to-day thing, and a body is as normal, say, as a tree growing um, in their neighborhood or in front of their house. And for us, it's something that is a little enclosed and covered and away. So when these two societies meet, there was obviously a lot of destruction and um, a lot of demands and needs grew from their side. They suddenly realized what it is to live to have access to more. But even today, when you go and talk to these people, what they really need, the ones who are living deep down in the forest, say, for example, the Kurumbas who are not was still living at the edge of the forest, or the Abuj Maria tribes was still living deep into the hills of Bastar. Um, uh, these when you ask them what they need, they just want to be left alone. They want to have access to forest. They want to have access to the forest resources because that's what they thrive on, right? Honey and berries and fruits from the forest and wood. But as soon as this access stops, that's when the need grows, and that's when they need to take things from the forest and start selling in the local markets. And obviously, they sell at a very for example, the Marias make this ant chutney. They collect red ants, which is a very tedious task, and put it together and make a chapra. It's called chapra. It's a red chutney, ant chutney, and it is bought and sold in the bigger villages around those areas for a much higher price, or even the maua liquor that they make, which has now become like a big rage, and now they're sort of procuring licenses and all of that. They so the exploitation is huge, of course. Um, the ideal situation would be to just leave, just sort of like cordon off these areas because they're preserving a certain way of living. They are living sustainable, organic, clean, whatever we as a modern society aspire for today, they already have that. So it's like we've gone full circle and we are aspiring for that, which they already have. So ideal would be to, what the Panchsheel principles once prescribed, keep these reserved tracts of forests, keep them there, let them be sacred, let not there be too much interaction between the mainstream, because that's how you preserve their ecosystem. But once they start interacting, then they need everything: water, education, access to good quality life, access to what we think is a good quality life. So yeah, it's a very complicated answer, and there is the Kurumbas. They're producing the first generation of educated people now, and 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 they they have a story to tell. When you talk to them, they tell you that how terribly they're exploited, because this is the first generation of education people. They don't know how to get jobs, or how to apply for jobs, or how to in what manner to work. So all these tea estates in those regions get really cheap labor done from them because they have lost access to forest resources which they once had access to, and there they are, like, without any knowledge of a new way of life. Each parent or each family story differs, from village to village, from tribe to tribe, from family to family. Unfortunately, I have met these people where the mainstream society has already made its way into these communities. And so, for example, when I was speaking to Birsu of the Maria tribe, she was she was she was trying to choose between, like, I remember the admission forms for her daughter's school lying there, in her on her little like trunk of clothes, and she was trying to choose between formal schooling at a hostel in the village, uh, against a life at a Godul. Because when you have a life at the Godul, you're too distracted to really go to school. So either she could go to school or she could go to the hostel. Now, the repercussion of going to the hostel would be life of an axle. And ultimately, she decided that she would rather have her daughter go to a school and then become an axle than uh, probably choose the life of a Bhutul, because her experience of life at a Bhutul is interestingly very disturbed. Because for a young girl at the age of 12, what we think is a very modern concept, but for a young girl at the age of 12, to be touched by a boy who she doesn't know is a very disturbing idea. So for her, she had to choose between those two lives, and she chose against her tradition and against her culture. She was then choosing the life of an axel because she had seen. a Naxal woman acting far more brave than what most girls at the Kutul were. So for her, that was the call that she was making. So it varied. I met a Kurumba lady. Kurumbas are the so-called sorcerers of the Nilgiris. It's one of the four major tribes of Nilgiris, and they haven't discriminated. It's worse than what we have with the untouchables here in the other societies. The treatment that they've been meted out is a lot worse than that. But then she wants to hold on to the culture. She wants her children to not go to formal schools. They prefer, because they guard their medicinal practices. They're also supposed to be, along with being sorcerers, they're also supposed to be the medicine men or the medicine women of the society. So apparently they also have a cure to AIDS, which they refuse to reveal, and things of that sort. Many issues which plague the mainstream society today, they already have a cure to that, but then they guard these secrets very, very closely. In fact, they don't even know the names of these herbs and plants. So for them, it's more of this and that. This shrub will do this and that shrub will do that, and it's all a thing that's passed on without specific names and terminologies to the next generation. So for them, they want to guard, and they want their children to continue with their tradition.
Mm.
The Khasi, 80% of them have already converted to Christianity. 20 remaining try very hard to cling on to their traditional Khasi religion. So it really varies. Kanjars obviously have surrendered to the Indian government after Vinoba Bhave and after what was her name? Raje, Vasundhara Raje came into power. A lot of the Kanjars have surrendered. And obviously, they don't want that life for their children, but what they want is access to land, access to an honorable life,
Mm.
which unfortunately is still discriminated against. Again, this varies from tribe to tribe. Bastar, there was no phone connection. Forget access to water and electricity. Although the electricity has made inroads in most of the places, the Kurumbas have access to one or two light bulbs. But then in both these places, almost zero services. In fact, Ramakrishna Mission seems to have done more work in spreading its Hinduism against what the government has done for them. And when it comes to Khasis, of course, it's almost a mainstream society now. But when you speak of Halakis have been trying for a very long time for their scheduled tribe status. I'm not sure if they got it or not. They must have gotten it because this research was like about 5 years ago and 6 years ago approximately. And they have been trying very hard for scheduled tribe status. In fact, they were one of the biggest losers of um, biggest losers when the zamindari system was over, because when the redistribution sort of happened, they had zero access to land, and even today most of them are laborers in other people's field, and they just have a little bit of land for their home and their cattle. And there's the other communities like Badagas, which are supposed to be the upper caste communities of these areas. Um, they have more access to land. So government has made inroads. Mostly they've been the promise of development. But I always ask this question, and I beg you to ask this question: what is development? Is development infrastructure? Is development access to electricity and water? Is development access to education? And what is all this for? Infrastructure, education, electricity, water. What is all this for? Health, health schemes. What is all this for? For their well-being, which they already have. So what are you trying to do there? You are only incursing into their society when you have your own needs and your own demands. They probably access to their natural resources, access to their mahua, access to their mines, access to their to expand your tea plantations, to expand your coffee plantations. They've all, first the inroads were made into their societies for our needs and our ends, and then you go there and then deprive them of everything they've already had, which you're now promising to give them, is sort of It's a zero sum game. I was thinking about this so much when I was chatting with that community, even them, and then even the Changpas. Because one thing that I realized that nothing is constant. Nothing is you, me, my community, your community, our religions. You know, there was once upon a time there was Christianity dominating the world. Then it became Hindus, and then became Muslim. Supposedly, like the Muslims are going to outnumber us. Nothing is a constant, thing. It's a dynamic world. I mean, I am teaching about like in my daughter, my 7-year-old daughter is she goes to school and she's learning about galaxies and sun, stars, and moons, and how nothing is a constant there. Like it's such a evolving process. Like even one day the sun is going to lose all its heat and become cold, and what then? So for us, I think it's a very important. The biggest takeaway to learn from these small tribes is to live in the present. जो आज है ना वही करते हैं, जो आज है उससे एंजॉय करते हैं, जो whatever we have today. uh, what is the point, the simple solution that psychologists have to anxiety is to not think about past. Simple solution for anger, for anxiety, is to not live in your past, to not live in your future, just to live now. And that's all these tribes do. They only care about, okay, is it going to rain today? Do I sow my field? How do I get my food today? How do I fill my stomach? And how do I get a sound sleep? That's all they care about. And that's all you and me are supposed to care about. Ultimately, like as a society as a whole, that's how we are supposed to care about. Like, are we being kind to everyone? Are we being kind to the environment? Are we sort of living in the present and constantly asking ourselves that question, that are we doing enough to being to everything around? So I think with neos, like even now, like you see, like that sort of aggression that you see when you talk, when you broach the subject to other communities, whether it's Hindus or Muslims, anywhere, like in say a Hyderabad or a Calcutta, especially in Calcutta and Delhi, where a lot of these post-partition victims are, uh, they don't have that sort of aggression because um, it's a grown-up community, is what I would say. And somewhere, I just came back from Germany. This summer I was in Germany for work, and then I came back from there, and I realized what a big grown-up country it is, when you compare it to the rest of Europe, because they they've seen the worst, and they've seen what hate can lead to, and they've seen what uh not what going to the extremes can bring. So it's incredible how they've evolved as a community. We have great examples around us, whether it is Neos or Germans. I think it is just forming the right constitution and just sticking to it. I think we have sort of touched upon this question, but let me go into detail. I To be very very honest, it is what the first point was what interested me, what intrigued me as a tribe. Number one. Number two was accessibility. How accessible, like how if I've been able to form a connection where I can go and talk in person in sort of a semi-safe environment. I don't care about being too safe, but then sort of a semi-safe environment where it's okay for them to open up and okay for me to ask questions and have a conversation of sorts. Number three was how honest I felt my interview story was. The times when it was when it just didn't feel right. It felt it was too altered. It felt I couldn't get enough out of them. Maybe the circumstances didn't permit that we speak enough about it, and so on and so forth. Sometimes you also need like a backstory, like a supplementary story to sort of strengthen this story. Sometimes that was missing. I think the most important factor was what helps us understanding. Like ultimately, I wanted to create a body of work that sort of helps you understand um, different parts of India and what they've gone through post independence and how have they evolved. How has their relationship with their own community, with their own culture, and how has that evolved over the years? And how has that affected an individual in their society? So for me, like I wanted to for that to come across very strong. And if a story somewhere felt weak, where I couldn't, sort of pull in information from different sources, secondary, primary, supplementary, then that story had to be left for later. So in the previous book, White as Milk and Rice, um, basically when White as Milk and Rice was published by Penguin in 2020 March, just in the year in the month COVID began, and in that is a book where I have written down stories of six tribals. This book, which is published by Duckbill, is for young adults and sort of like a simple version. It has four more stories and it has 10 tribes, which is supposed to be part of these 10 series that they're doing. And the four more are the one, the Champas, the Jaravas. Jaravas I chose not to go there. So all the information is from secondary sources, and because I did not want to be it's a very physically they're not exposed to as many viruses and bacteria from the mainstream society as say the rest of the tribes. So I did not want to be very incursive, so it was from the borders. And the Champas, and then you have the Bhils and the Meos. These were the four tribes where I couldn't get enough out of. So they ended up being a part of the. I can answer this question for the Halakis and the Muria Marias because these were my two women interviewees who I could easily ask this question to. But like the Muria Marias and the Halakis both seem to have not more than three children. And I'm talking about my generation. So clearly they seem to be using some sort of contraceptive. The Maria lady, uh, the Marias have this tradition. So with with these communities, uh, they don't use the contraceptives that we do. They basically follow their menstrual cycle very closely, which is and they know when not to do things. So for in Gotul, they there are set dates when a woman does not sleep with a man. There are almost zero cases of pregnancies in the Gotuls where there's so many young adolescent boys and girls. But very, very like a very rare case of pregnancy happens in the Gotul. So their contraceptive methods are very, very different. In fact, Birsu, the lady I interviewed, had just one child and she did not plan to have more. On the same with the Kurumba tribe. The Kurumba tribe, I think I interviewed about 12 households and none of them had more than, yeah, definitely not more than three kids. Most men, for example, the Halakis have taken to, because their original means of livelihood was agriculture and hunting. And they have lost over the years access to both. Most men there have taken to alcohol, and in most of the tribes that you see, um, whether it is Halaki, Kurumba, Kanjar, it is the women who are helming the affairs, much like most of India's rural society as well, because the men have either taken to alcohol or to drugs. This includes the Khasi tribe also, because for them, you know, it's a very confusing stance because what's happened with modernity is that um, it's a matrilineal tribe where uh, inheritance happens, but the women have no power on paper because ultimately it is the uni or the mama who has to sign these papers. So where does that leave the men of the society? Here they are living in the in-laws amongst the in-laws, who they are not obliged to take care of, nor do they feel obliged to take care of the children because they do not, there's no sort of passing down of inheritance or, you know, and women ultimately become the breadwinners and the bread makers both. It leaves the men sort of confused and wayward, and the divorce rates are highest in Meghalaya, second highest among the Khasis. Uh, Many men have walked out of marriages. Many men have extramarital affairs. Most men have taken to alcohol and drug abuse. So largely, I mean, I've seen this with Kanjars where they manufacture Kanjari whiskey and they've taken to it. I see this with Halakis. I see this with Khasis. I see this with Kurumbas. Intoxicated most of the time. Women are the ones who are working as laborers in the fields, taking care of children. Yeah, so I think it has taken a huge toll, um, because they have lost their identity, uh, you know, of what they had a few years back. And with women, it affects them a little less because ultimately they have to feed their babies. So I think, yeah, but that I mean, the stories are endless. This is just one of the stories of maybe 100 stories I could recount. We could have another session on identity, and because the conjures have, the conjures are struggling because even today, when they pass a household, you know, they sort of sprinkle Ganga Jal once they have left that path because they think that, oh, conjure has crossed my house, something bad is bound to happen. When it comes to uh, the Kurumbas, for years and years they were deep into the forest. Suddenly they've been pulled out. It's sort of like a sort of like what do you call, like an inertia, because you know they're befuddled. They do not understand the complexities of a modern urban society, nor do they want to be their uh, rural selves. But this is it's a very complex place to be in. Khasis, in all of them, face with massive identity issues. Yeah, I think the book is all about that. Again, ban on hunting, lack of access to forest resources. So their main access to forest resources used to be, what is it called? Like chironji, like the Muria Marias, chironji, which we put in the kheer, honey. Honey, honey used to be again like something that that was sort of like nectar for them, like the nectar of life or nectar of gods. It was
Right.
a food offering that they made to gods. They have lost access to that, or rather, it's become a very commercial thing where it's better to sell the honey than to consume it themselves. Number three is, their the ban on hunting has obviously made them look at meat differently. Instead of environmentally being careful about what they're hunting, or chicken or duck, whatever's available around them. The Khasis, the Konyaks, where hunting is still allowed, their forests have almost emptied. Because when you drive to Mon, where I interviewed the this Cognac, which is somewhere near Longwa, like about 2-3 hours away from Longwa village, which is in the border of India and Burma. There's this little village again, like many hours on Kacha Road, and that was and they when you go through these forests, you almost hear no birds and animals. It's eerily quiet. You don't even hear crickets because the hunting has been so rampant that they'll probably find like they're still hunting at a massive scale without any sort of curbs on it that they eat, like the staple crop. The Halakis used to be big ragi consumers, but since the Badagas, the richer community used to eat the soft, fluffy rice, they have also moved to the soft, fluffy rice because it's a aspirational thing. The Kanjars used to again like these are the ravines of Chambal where food is seriously scarce. So once upon a time, they used to eat corn and bajra and red chana and jawar, not jawar, bajra largely, but then it's all shifted to wheat, corn. Very yeah, the grains have changed a lot. Their access to traditional herbs, because for example, the kurumbas, when they're walking through the jungles, okay, I remember going on a walk through one of the jungles in Nilgiris, and she would just pick this herb and I start munching on it, saying that, I'm not feeling she said, like, I feel like I need the translation went something like this. She thought she wanted some iron in her body, and that's why she's munching on these leaves. So that whole, they were completely in sync. This is what Ayurveda prescribes today. Go back and sync with your body, see what your body needs and eat accordingly. And they would eat, munch, herb, eat very seasonally.